So I volunteered for the paratroops, and we had 5 weeks of jump school. We learned how to pack parachutes, and we dropped from 200-foot towers, and we jumped out of airplanes 5 times to practice, and we did all kinds of other things like all kinds of push-ups and crawling under.
Well, they like those wired like things that.
Under machine guns and things of that sort, handicap courses and so forth. And after we had finished that 5 weeks, I was supposed to get a furlough and go home for 2 weeks, and then they were going to ship me overseas. So I had told my family that I was going to come at a certain time, and I was selected instead to go to parachute rigger school. That was 7 weeks of additional training, and I called the. We didn't have a telephone, so I called the Western Union, and I said, I'm going to be delayed because I'm going to go to rigger school for 7 weeks, so I'm going to be delayed for 7 weeks. And the telegraph operator spelled riggers RIGORS, and I've been telling my folks about all the tough things I was doing, and now they wonder what are they going to do with my son now. So I went home to rigger school. I went home, got shipped overseas. I caught influenza. Crossing the channel to France, and I got sent to a hospital. And then the 17th Airborne Division was assembled just for the attack into Germany, and I was enlisted in the and I got there just before they were going to jump. And the week before, they had gotten a new parachute, and the new parachute had a one button. Instead of having to unlatch all kind of things, you just hit that one button, and everything fell. All the straps fell away. And they had a practice jump the week before, but I came there late and missed that because I was in the hospital. And so they tried to brief me on that. They showed me all and so forth. And so on the day that we were supposed to jump, we got up in the middle of the night and got into the airplanes, and just at daybreak they took off, and we flew at about 200 feet, and the fighter bombers, the British fighter bombers were ahead of us, and they were shooting up everything. They were only at 100 feet, and they were shooting up everything. And then before we jumped, we had a sand table, which they had modeled the area that we were going to jump in. And they said, here, you're going to see this clear area, and this clear area, and that clear area, and that's where you're going to land. Well, when I got out of the airplane and my parachute opened, I was only up at 200 feet, and my parachute opened, and I looked as far as I could see. There was nothing but woods, nothing but forest. And I remembered that and the first thing we were supposed to do was dump our reserve parachute. But I remembered a training film in which it said if you're going to land in trees, you should keep your reserve parachute on. It said that you should only hook it on one side, but I didn't remember that, and I hooked it up on both sides. So I jumped and I landed in the trees, and I was dangling about 30 feet up, and that reserve chute was in front of me, and I punched a button. I started slipping down, and the chute caught under my helmet, and my hands were straight up, and I couldn't get down, and I was just sitting, I was just hanging there. And finally somebody climbed a tree and cut me loose, and instead of saying, hey, grab this branch or something, he said, look out below. And I dropped 30 feet, and I landed on my shoulder and dislocated my shoulder. This was a problem with jumping out of parachutes, is that we, about a third of our people got injured in the jump because we came down very hard, because we were carrying all kind of baggage. I had about 100 pounds of grenades attached to me when I came down. I came down pretty fast. Okay, so there I was, and the Germans were all around us shooting, and there I was. A medic came along, and he put my arm in a sling, and I was assigned to guard prisoners, and we were getting all kinds of prisoners because we had caught the Germans making breakfast, and they were all in their barracks. They weren't outside, and they started shooting at us from the barracks. But as soon as we could make some noise, like shoot a bazooka into it, or throw in a grenade, they would give up. And they were mostly old men and young kids, because everybody else in the German army was dead, or they were in Russia. So about 2 days later, Montgomery's troops, the British, joined up with us, and I was taken to the hospital, and I was in a British ambulance, and we were stuck in Belgium in a big traffic jam, and I was getting so thirsty, and the British were issued beer, and this driver had just gotten his issue a bottle of beer, and he had it up on the instrument panel. And I told him, listen, I'm getting so thirsty, I need to go find some water. And he looked at me, and he looked at the beer, and he looked at me, and he grabbed the bottle of beer and gave it to me. And ever since then, I've been very friendly toward British people. I had one other experience. I was in the hospital, of course, and I was about to be released, and they asked me to stay because they were getting train loads of slave laborers. These slave laborers were all coming from hospitals. They had been forced to work at night rebuilding railroads while we were bombing, and they had lost fingers and toes and arms and legs, and they were coming in trainloads into this hospital. And the Germans had run out of cloth for bandages, and they used paper bandages. What they did was they had something like sulfa they put that on the wound, and then they put a paper bandage on and never looked at it again. And these people hadn't had a bath for a year. They were full of lice. They smelled, you could smell the train coming 30 minutes before it arrived. It's just horrible living conditions. And of course, they had hardly anything to eat. And they asked me to help in taking these bandages off. And these people had bandages on, but they hadn't been looked at ever since they were first put on. And it turned out that almost everyone was healing very well. And the doctor told me, he said, remember, if you have a wound, don't bother it. Just bandage it once and ignore it. After a month, it will be all healed up again. So I learned that. And then after the war, at that time the war was over, and in about a month I was shipped back. We were supposed to occupy Berlin. I was transferred to the 82nd Airborne, and after a while they decided that we would participate in a victory march down Fifth Avenue in New York. And so we got home early, and we made that march, and in February I was discharged, either February or March. I was discharged, and then I enrolled back into school, and of course the GI Bill paid for the rest of my schooling. So that's my story.
Okay, thanks a lot for telling your story, sir.
Okay.
So here's my second question. What was the hardest part about fighting in the war? Like was it the Germans themselves, or was it like some terrible conditioning?
Well, the terrible thing was artillery barrages. Artillery barrages came in, and they were just horrible. You were in a foxhole, and these artillery shells would hit, and body parts would fly all over the place. And it was just, as they said, there were no atheists in foxholes. That was the most horrible thing.
Oh,